The morning I opened that letter, I had no idea it would uncover my brother's biggest secret and change everything I believed about family. It was one of those quiet mornings in the Midwest, calm, cool, and a little too peaceful. The kind of morning where the air feels heavier than usual, like it's holding a secret. I remember standing on the porch of my late father's farmhouse, coffee in hand, watching the wind move through the oak trees he planted decades ago. That house, it wasn't just wood and paint. It was our family story, generations of work, memories, and lessons carved into every wall. My name's Ethan Cole, and for most of my life, I believed family came before everything. My father taught me that. He used to say, "Never let money change the way you treat people." I didn't realize until much later. That's exactly what would tear us apart. My father had passed just a few weeks before. The grief hadn't even settled when responsibility started piling up. The funeral, the estate, the endless paperwork. My older brother Ryan took charge of everything, just like he always did. Ryan was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and make everyone trust him. Confident smile, strong handshake, always had the right words. I used to look up to him, I really did. Growing up, I was the quiet one, more comfortable fixing things in Dad's workshop than talking to people. Ryan? He was the talker, the planner, the leader. Or so I thought. That morning, I was sorting through Dad's old desk, planning to donate some of his clothes, maybe clear the paperwork. Most of it was just old receipts, faded photographs, and his journals. Then, I found it. A single white envelope. No address. No stamp. Just my name on it, Ethan. The handwriting stopped me cold. It was my father's. My hands trembled a little as I picked it up. Something about the way it was sealed felt deliberate, like he'd hidden it there for me to find, not for anyone else. I sat down at his desk, sunlight pouring across the wood, and slowly tore it open. Inside was a folded letter and a small brass key taped to the corner. The paper smelled faintly of the cedar drawers Dad always kept his things in. His words started simple, loving, almost casual. He wrote about the family, about how proud he was of both of us. He said he hoped Ryan and I would take care of each other when I'm gone. But then, halfway through, his tone changed. "Ethan," it said, "if you're reading this, I need you to be careful. There are things about the estate, things I couldn't tell you in person. Trust what you know is right. And whatever happens, remember, I left something behind for you to find." I read it 3 times, every line heavier than the last. What did he mean by be careful? What did he leave behind? And that key, what was it for? For a moment, I just sat there staring out the window, trying to breathe. The wind outside picked up, pushing the porch swing gently back and forth, the same swing where Dad used to sit every evening, humming old country tunes. Something in my gut told me that this letter wasn't just a farewell. It was a warning. As I slipped the letter back into the envelope, I noticed something else, a faint smudge near the bottom corner, like someone had touched it recently. It couldn't have been Dad. He'd been gone for weeks. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. "Ethan?" It was Ryan. His voice carried that smooth confidence I'd heard my whole life. I quickly slid the envelope into my jacket pocket before turning around. "Hey, didn't know you were coming by," I said. He smiled, that practiced perfect smile. "Just checking in, you know, making sure you're doing okay." We talked for a few minutes, small talk mostly, the kind that hides bigger things underneath. But I couldn't stop glancing at his hands. They were clean, well manicured, but something about the faint ink mark on his thumb caught my eye, the same kind of ink my father used for his fountain pen after Ryan left. I sat back down, heart pounding. Could he have known about the letter? I looked down at the key again. It had a tiny engraving, C14. There were dozens of old cabinets and lockboxes in the workshop behind the house. Dad kept everything organized with numbers. I suddenly remembered that one drawer, the one he always kept locked, Right next to his old ledger books, the brass key gleamed in my palm. My pulse quickened. If you're reading this, I left something behind for you to find. What if that something was still waiting, just a few feet away? I stood up, the floorboards creaking beneath my boots, and looked toward the workshop at the edge of the property. The sunlight had shifted, golden and eerie, cutting through the dust. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was the start of a mystery. I didn't know it then, I whispered to the camera. But that letter was my father's last defense against the betrayal already in motion. They say funerals bring families together. But for us, that day, it marked the beginning of the end. The rain hadn't stopped since sunrise. It came down steady, quiet but constant, as if the whole town was mourning with us. The small white church on Maple Street looked exactly like it did when I was a kid. The same stained glass windows, the same wooden cross above the altar. But this time, it wasn't Sunday service. It was my father's farewell. I remember standing beside his casket, shaking hands with people I barely knew. Everyone said the same thing. Your dad was a great man, Ethan. He'd be proud of you. I smiled politely, nodded, but inside I was just empty. Ryan, my older brother, moved through the crowd like he was born for it. He shook hands, hugged distant relatives, comforted neighbors, even cracked a few gentle smiles to lighten the mood. He was calm, too calm. That was Ryan, always in control, always the one with answers. When the pastor began to speak, I tried to focus on his words, but my mind drifted. I could still see Dad sitting on that same pew years ago, with his arm around both of us. Back then, things were simple. Flashback, the sound of wood crackling in our backyard. Dad teaching us how to build toy airplanes out of scraps. Ryan's plane always flew farther. Mine always broke first. And every time, Dad would pat my shoulder and say, "Doesn't matter how far it flies, son. What matters is that you built it yourself." Those words stuck with me. They still do. When the service ended, the lawyer, Mr. Hawley, approached Ryan and me quietly. A gray-haired man with tired eyes. He whispered something to Ryan, handed him a small envelope, and nodded toward me. I walked over, confused. "What's going on?" I asked. Ryan gave me that practice smile, the one that always made you feel small without him even trying. "Nothing big, Ethan, just estate stuff. The will's being—" Looked over again. Looked over? I frowned. Dad's will was done years ago. Mr. Hawley stepped in, adjusting his glasses. "It's a routine review, Mr. Cole. A few details needed clarification. We'll have everything finalized soon." He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. It felt strange. Dad was a straightforward man. Everything he did was clear and fair. If he'd written a will, there shouldn't have been any confusion. But I didn't press. It was my father's funeral. I wasn't in the mood for conflict. After the service, we gathered back at the old farmhouse for dinner. Family, neighbors, friends. Everyone filled the house with polite conversation and the smell of casseroles. But the warmth felt fake. Ryan floated from room to room, charming as ever. He told everyone how much he'd miss Dad, how he planned to honor his memory by taking care of the estate. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring out at the fields behind the house. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, heavy, like it knew something I didn't. When most people left, it was just the two of us. Ryan poured a glass of whiskey for himself and slid a cup of coffee toward me. "Don't worry about the paperwork," he said, leaning back in Dad's old chair. "I'll make sure everything goes smoothly." Dad wanted it that way. I looked at him. "You sure about that?" He chuckled, swirling his drink. "Ethan, come on. You've never cared about the business side of things. Let me handle it. You focus on you." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Maybe he was right. Ryan always handled the money, the taxes, the meetings with lawyers. Dad trusted him with those things. And honestly, I didn't want to think about finances while I was still grieving. So I nodded. All right, just make sure Dad's wishes are honored. He raised his glass. You have my word. That word, meant something back when Dad was around. But that night, it felt hollow. Later, when I went upstairs, I passed Dad's study. The door was half open, a faint light glowing from inside. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, the shadow of someone at his desk. But when I looked closer, the room was empty. Just the lamp left on, the window open, and the paper stacked neatly. Something inside me felt off. Like a whisper I couldn't hear, but knew was there. I closed the door, telling myself I was just tired. As I walked down the hallway, I heard Ryan on the phone in the next room. His tone was low, serious, not the charming voice he used at the funeral. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard one sentence clearly. Yeah. It's already taken care of. He won't question it. My heart sank. I didn't know who he was talking to or what it was. But I knew one thing for sure. My brother was keeping secrets. That night, as the rain started again, I sat by my bedroom window staring out at the fields. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the farmhouse, the land, and the man I thought I could trust. I wanted to believe him, I whisper in voiceover. I really did. The camera pans slowly across the old family photos on the wall. Dad with his arm around both of us, smiling. Unaware of the storm his sons were about to face. It wasn't the funeral that broke our family, I say softly. It was what happened after. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the person you once trusted most. The one who knew exactly how to hurt you. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral. The sky over Kansas City was gray that morning, heavy, dull, and cold. The kind of morning that doesn't feel like it ever really wakes up. I was driving my old pickup truck down Main Street when my phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made my heart race. Mr. Hawley, the lawyer. He said, "Ethan, the will has been processed. You might want to come by today." His voice sounded formal, distant. Not the same man who had shaken my hand at Dad's funeral. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. When I reached his office, the air inside felt colder than outside. The walls were lined with law books and certificates, but all I could hear was the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us. Mr. Hawley gestured for me to sit. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses and opened a thick brown folder. Ryan was already there, sitting across the room, legs crossed, looking calm and collected. He gave me a short nod, that same practiced smile that used to mean comfort, but now it just felt hollow. "Mr. Cole," the lawyer began, glancing between us. "I'll read the official statement from your father's estate." He cleared his throat and continued. "All properties, accounts, and holdings belonging to Mr. Daniel Cole will be transferred solely to his eldest son, Mr. Ryan Cole." My ears rang. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "Wait. What?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. "That can't be right. My dad said he promised everything was supposed to be split between us." The lawyer hesitated. "I'm sorry, Ethan. The documents were updated recently. It appears your father signed a new version before his passing." I turned to Ryan, searching his face for any sign that this was a mistake. But he didn't even flinch. He just sat there, looking almost proud. I could feel my throat tightening. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Ethan, come on. Dad trusted me with the business. You were never really interested in managing it. I thought you'd be relieved." "Relieved?" I repeated. My voice cracked on the word. "You took everything, Ryan. The house, the land, the accounts. Even his workshop. You left me with nothing." He shrugged. "You have the old truck, don't you? And Dad left you some cash. It's fair." I stared at him, speechless. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to escape. Mr. Hawley quietly closed the folder, avoiding my eyes. He looked ashamed, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the floor. Dad would never have done this. Never. Ryan's tone hardened. Maybe you didn't know him as well as you thought. That line hit me like a punch. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Outside, the wind cut through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My thoughts were spinning. Every memory I had with my father, every word, every promise, none of it lined up with what just happened. Dad was fair, honest to a fault. He used to tell us, you share the land, because one day it'll outlive you both. So why would he change everything right before he died? As I drove away, I couldn't stop seeing Ryan's face, calm, confident, untouchable. The way he'd looked at me in that office wasn't brotherly. It was condescending, cold, voiceover. He made it sound so logical, so reasonable. But greed always dresses up as reason. And I had just watched my brother wear it like a suit. That evening, I drove back to the farmhouse. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway. The lights were off, the house dark, but the memory of our family still lingered in every corner. I sat there in the truck for a long time, staring at the porch where Dad used to drink his coffee each morning. The chair was still there, rocking gently in the wind. Inside my chest, the heartbreak was starting to harden into something else, something quieter. Stronger, determination. I didn't know how Ryan did it, whether he forged papers or convinced someone to help him. But I knew one thing. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. As I stepped out of the truck, the night air hit me, sharp and cold. I could see my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, unshaven face, anger flickering beneath the sadness. That night, I whisper in the voiceover, as I stared at the empty driveway of my father's home. I promised myself this wasn't over. The camera pans out slowly, the farmhouse in the distance. The wind picking up, thunder rolling faintly in the background. Because sometimes, the only way to honor the truth is to fight for it. When you lose everything you thought was yours, you start to wonder who you are without it. It had been months since I walked out of that lawyer's office. I'd packed what little I had, a few clothes, Dad's old tool set, and memories I wasn't ready to face, and moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. The rent was cheap, the walls were thin, and the silence was deafening. Most nights, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, the funeral, the will, Ryan's smug smile. Every detail felt heavier the more I thought about it. During the day, I worked late shifts at a repair shop just to keep the lights on. It was honest work, but every time I wiped my hands on that greasy towel, I'd think about how Dad once told me, a man's worth isn't in what he owns, it's in what he builds. But what if everything you built gets taken away? What then? The guilt started to eat at me. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe I wasn't responsible enough. That's what betrayal does. It makes you question your own truth. One evening, after another long shift, I stopped by a small diner. The kind of place where the waitress knows everyone's name. I sat there stirring my coffee, staring at the rain outside. A couple of old men were talking about family land and inheritances, arguing about trust and fairness. I couldn't help but listen. And for the first time, it hit me. Dad never believed in leaving things unclear. He was fair to a fault. He used to say, a family's strength isn't in what you own, it's in what you share. That memory wouldn't let me go. When I got home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something. Something big. Dad had a storage unit just outside town, a place where he kept his old tools, photo albums, and paperwork. I hadn't been there since the funeral. It was time. The next morning I drove out there. The air smelled like dust and rain. The place was quiet, except for the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above. I unlocked the metal door, and as it creaked open, I felt that wave of nostalgia, the kind that hurts. Inside were rows of boxes stacked high, each one labeled in Dad's neat handwriting. Farm equipment, workshop tools, receipts 2015 to 2020, and then, tucked in the back corner, half covered by an old tarp, was a small wooden chest. On top of it, in faded marker, it said, "Private for Ethan." My heart stopped. I knelt down, brushed off the dust, and lifted the lid. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, thick, worn, and sealed with a small strap. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were neatly folded pages, land deeds, handwritten letters, and bank statements. But what caught my eye was the title on one document, "Last Will and Testament of Daniel Cole, Final Revision." I skimmed through it, my breath catching with every line. It clearly stated that the estate, property, and family assets were to be divided equally between both sons, Ryan and me. My chest tightened. This was Dad's real will. And then I saw something else, a smaller envelope tucked inside the back cover. On it, written in Dad's hand, "Ethan, in case of confusion, this will protect you." Inside was a short note from Mr. Hawley, our lawyer. It read, "Daniel requested that I keep a copy of this document on file. It reflects his true intentions. I will finalize it once he confirms in person next week." The date on that letter was 3 days before Dad passed away, which meant the version Ryan presented had been created after that. I sat there on the cold concrete floor, the ledger open in my lap, my heart pounding in my ears. Pieces of the puzzle started connecting, the lawyer's nervous eyes, Ryan's ink-stained hands, the mysterious review of the will. That didn't cut me out. He didn't change a thing. Ryan did. That's when I realized my brother didn't just take what was mine. He rewrote our father's legacy. I closed the ledger gently, staring at the words, "Private for Ethan." Dad knew this might happen. Somehow he knew. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt focused. The storm outside had stopped. The silence that used to hurt now felt different, almost calm. "Dad left me the truth," I whisper. "And that's more powerful than anything Ryan owns." They say revenge isn't worth it. But when someone steals your truth, revenge starts to feel a lot like justice. After finding my father's ledger, I couldn't sleep for nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan sitting in that lawyer's office, smiling while taking everything our father built. But this time, I had proof. Still, I knew I had to be careful. Ryan was smart, manipulative. If I made one wrong move, he'd twist it all back on me. So I started quietly. I reached out to Mr. Hale's former assistant, a young woman named Chloe. She'd worked in the office for years before suddenly quitting right after Dad passed. I found her living in a small apartment outside Kansas City. When she opened the door and saw the ledger in my hands, her expression changed. Fear, recognition, and guilt all at once. "Ethan," she whispered, "I knew something wasn't right. Ryan came to the office days after your father's death. He had documents, said they were urgent updates. Mr. Hawley didn't want to sign off, but Ryan convinced him. Then the notary came. And that's when everything changed." I asked her quietly, "Do you still have any records of that day?" She nodded, reaching into an old file box by her desk. She handed me a printed email chain, timestamps, digital logs, everything. Ryan had bribed the notary to backdate signatures and forged the final version of the will. The truth was finally in my hands, but I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Ryan always cared about appearances, about being the perfect son, the successful businessman, the charming host. If I took him down in private, he'd spin the story. I needed to expose him, not just legally, publicly. That's when I found out about the charity gala. It was all over the local papers. The Cole Foundation annual charity ball, honoring the legacy of Daniel Cole. My father's name, used as decoration on an invitation to Ryan's lies. I stared at the article for a long time before whispering, "All right, brother. If it's a show you want, I'll give you one you'll never forget." From that day, every spare moment became preparation. At night, I organized evidence, the real will, the email logs, the letter from Mr. Hawley, and a voice recording from Chloe confirming what she'd witnessed. By day, I practiced my words, not for a courtroom, but for a stage. My heart burned with quiet determination. I didn't want to destroy him, I wanted to expose him. He wanted to build his empire on lies. I'd let him. Right up until the moment it all fell apart. The week before the gala, I called an old family friend, Mrs. Parker, the woman who used to manage the estate's books. She'd known my father for decades. When I showed her the documents, tears welled up in her eyes. "Daniel would have been proud of you, Ethan," she said softly. "Do what's right. Don't let him win." Her words echoed in my mind every night leading up to that event. And finally, the night came. The estate was glowing under the warm lights of chandeliers and flash cameras. I could hear laughter spilling out onto the front lawn, the same place Dad once planted his first oak tree. People in suits and gowns toasted to family values and success stories. Ryan stood at the top of the staircase, confident, shaking hands and smiling for every photograph. I parked a few blocks away, straightened my tie, and looked in the mirror. I wasn't the broken man who left that office months ago. I was the son my father raised, honest, calm, and ready. Under my arm was the leather ledger, the truth that could undo everything. Ryan had built. As I walked toward the mansion, the music faded into the distance, replaced by the pounding of my own heartbeat. I stepped through the grand doors. The chatter stopped. Ryan turned. Our eyes met. His smile froze halfway. For the first time in years, I whisper in voiceover, I wasn't scared of him. He was scared of me. They say truth has a way of showing up when you least expect it. But that night, I didn't wait for it to show up. I brought it with me. The ballroom was glowing. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and the sound of a jazz band echoed against the marble floor. People dressed in silk and tuxedos toasted to the Cole family legacy, the same legacy my brother had stolen. I stood near the back of the room, watching from the shadows. The chandeliers reflected off the glass of my father's old estate, the house that used to feel like home. Ryan was at the center of it all, confident, charming, perfectly dressed. Cameras flashed around him as he greeted guests, shaking hands, his smile as polished as the floor beneath his shoes. Then the host called for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ryan Cole." Applause thundered. Ryan stepped onto the stage, holding a microphone like he'd been born for it. He smiled, his voice calm and practiced. "Tonight isn't about me," he said. "It's about family, legacy, and the values my father built this estate on: honesty, unity, and hard work." The crowd clapped, nodding along. I felt my jaw tighten. Honesty. The words stung. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. When he paused to sip his drink, I spoke, my voice quiet but clear. "You forgot to mention one more thing, Ryan." The room went still. Heads turned. My shoes echoed across the marble as I walked closer. Ryan blinked, surprised, then forced a smile. "Ethan, didn't expect to see you here tonight." I stopped just a few feet from the stage. "Oh, I wouldn't have missed it." I heard this was about honoring Dad's memory. He chuckled awkwardly. "Of course. You're always welcome, brother." I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. "Then let's honor him properly. You forgot to mention the part where you forged Dad's will." The music stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. The silence that followed felt like thunder. Ryan's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" he said, trying to laugh it off. "Ethan, maybe we should." I reached into my coat and pulled out the ledger, the same one Dad left for me. The gold clasp shimmered under the light. Dad's real will, I said. Signed, sealed, and witnessed, before you touched a single page. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" I laid the open ledger on the table beside me, then pressed play on my phone. Chloe's voice came through, shaky but clear. Ryan Cole bribed a notary to backdate his father's signature. I was there. I saw the documents changed. The recording echoed through the hall. Reporters who'd come to cover the charity event lifted their cameras instantly. The flashes began, bright, relentless. Ryan tried to laugh again, but his voice cracked. "That's ridiculous. You can't prove anything." I met his gaze and held it. "You're right. I can't, but they can." I pointed toward Mrs. Parker, standing at the back, holding another set of documents, copies of the bank transfers and signatures. The guests murmured louder now. Some shook their heads, others backed away from Ryan's side. He took a step forward, desperate. "You think this makes you better than me?" I looked at him, not with anger anymore, but with calm. "No. Ryan, it just makes me free." The room fell silent again. Except for the soft click of cameras, he stared at me, eyes burning. Face pale, before turning and storming off the stage, I stood there, breathing slowly. Surrounded by people who finally saw the truth. The same estate that once felt stolen now felt lighter, as if Dad himself had been watching. Voiceover softens. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just takes one voice refusing to stay quiet. I turned toward the crowd, the lights glinting off the ledger in my hands, and walked out the same doors I once left in defeat. This time, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking toward peace. They say peace doesn't come when you win. It comes when you stop fighting what's already over. Weeks had passed since that night, the night everything came to light. The gala, the confrontation, the truth. It was all over now. The court reviewed the evidence, the real will, the recordings, the witnesses. And in the end, justice didn't roar. It arrived quietly, with a single verdict. The estate would be restored exactly as my father intended. When I heard the judge's words, I didn't feel victory. I just felt relief. Ryan didn't show up in court. He didn't have to. The silence from his side said enough. His lawyers withdrew the fake documents. The press turned on him, and within days, he vanished from the public eye. No statements, no apologies, just gone. I thought I'd feel satisfied, maybe even proud. But as I stood outside that courthouse, holding the leather ledger against my chest, all I felt was a strange, quiet sadness. Not because I'd lost anything, but because I realized I'd never really wanted revenge. I'd wanted peace. The house felt different now, warmer, brighter. For the first time since Dad passed, the air didn't feel heavy anymore. I walked past the framed photographs on the walls, Dad smiling with us on the porch. Ryan and me as kids covered in mud after helping with chores. Back then, things were simple. We didn't care about land or money. We cared about being together. Now, I was walking those halls alone. But it didn't hurt the same way anymore. A letter lay on the entry table, the final paperwork confirming the property's return. My name beside Dad's, where it was always meant to be. I took a deep breath and smiled. I knew what I had to do next. That afternoon, I met with the local charity board. I donated part of the estate's funds to build a new community center, the Daniel Cole Foundation. Dad always believed in giving back. I figured it was the best way to keep his legacy alive, not through wealth, but through kindness. When the papers were signed, I walked outside and looked toward the horizon. The sun was setting over the same fields where Dad used to work every morning. Voiceover softens. I thought taking back the estate would heal me. But what really mattered wasn't the land. It was the truth. The wind moved gently through the grass, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice again, calm, steady. full of pride. Never let money change the way you treat people, son. I smiled. I won't, Dad, not anymore. The porch swing creaked softly, the same one Dad used to sit on after long days. I watched the sky turn gold, then orange, then fade into night. There was no anger left, no bitterness. Just peace, the kind that comes after a storm finally passes. Ryan's name would probably fade from headlines soon. Maybe one day he'd find his own way to make things right. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Greed may win in silence, I whisper, but truth always finds a voice. And when it does, it speaks louder than any fortune ever could. I leaned back, watching the stars appear one by one, the night wrapping the estate in quiet. For the first time in years, I felt free, not because I'd taken something back, but because I'd let something go. When life takes everything from you, remember, the truth can't be buried forever. It always finds a way back to the light. If Ethan's story touched you, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps more people find stories like this. And if you've ever faced betrayal, heartbreak, or found your own kind of justice, share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Subscribe for more emotional stories of revenge, redemption, and truth, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming who they said you couldn't be.